configuration when it was a trainer for the United States Navy. It's a fairly conventional biplane, but as you'd expect for a training aircraft, they get bounced around quite a lot, so very rugged construction. Large fixed undercarriage, room for student and instructor that sit in open cockpits. They sit one behind the other, something we call tandem. We'll talk about side by side a little later on during the display we have for you this afternoon. Built as a private venture by the Stearman Aircraft Company of Wichita, which was then taken over, I think joined, might be a better word to use, with Boeing back in 1934. Incredible, over 10,000 Stearmans were built between 1933 and 1945. Estimated some 1,000 still airworthy around the world. The United States Army Air Corps and United States Navy realised they had an issue with their training aircraft around about the mid-30s, and it was the Stearman that came to the rescue. Now the engine on this aircraft is what we call a radial. The cylinders are arranged in a circle, and indeed if you're near to the front of the crowd line you can clearly see the engine is uncowled. The cylinders are in the breeze. Engines come in all sorts of different cylinder configurations. The three most common being inline, the V and this, the radial. It does give the engine and the aircraft certainly a very distinctive sound. Generally powered by a 450 horsepower Pratt & Whitney radial. That propeller, some 10-foot diameter. Known to be a fairly forgiving aircraft to fly, but it did have just enough in it to keep the student on his or her toes. You don't really want an aircraft that's too easy to fly early on. The student needs to learn, and that does involve sometimes getting yourself into controlled but slightly unusual situations. For many pilots that fought with the United States during the Second World War, they carried out a lot of their training on the Stearman. Certainly the basic end of training before then moving on generally to something like the Harvard, and then converted to whatever aircraft type they were destined to fly in service. This very attractive one, an N2S from the US Navy built. It's believed in about 1942 or 43, 220 horsepower from its Continental R670 engine, and you could go flying in this. Sue Girdler and TG Aviation offer trial flight trips with this aeroplane out of the very attractive grass airfield at Penn Farm near Hythe in Kent, taking in places like the Battle of Britain Memorial at Capel-le-Fern and so forth. And if you're training towards your private pilot's license, the hours can count towards that. As Andy mentioned, we have this aeroplane in our display as part of our Women in Defence theme, and a nod to women in the US Armed Forces in flying roles during World War II. It was on the 10th of September 1942 that 25 women pilots were organised by a lady by the name of Nancy Harkness Love into what was known as the WAFS, the Women's Auxiliary Ferrying Squadron, headquartered at Newcastle Army Airfield in Delaware. Well, they formed a very similar sort of outfit to our own Air Transport Auxiliary, although of course the ATA saw both men and women involved together. Just 40 women wore that service's uniform before the decision was taken to merge it into another organisation far better known, Women Air Force Service Pilots, or the WASPs.
She says he's married to that.
Oh really? She's married to it?
And among the aircraft on which the WASPs trained were Boeing Stearman Kaydets like this one. Just like the ATA, they undertook the ferrying of newly built or newly overhauled aircraft from the airfields at which they'd been produced or subject to heavy maintenance and flown on to their frontline bases, or indeed training units and the like. It followed on from earlier efforts whereby Jacqueline Cochrane, one of the leading female aviators of the interwar period, had attempted to persuade the powers that be in the US Army Air Corps, as it was then, to take on female pilots. She wasn't successful in that endeavour, so instead Cochrane put together a group of women pilots, and they formed part of our own Air Transport Auxiliary. Cochrane herself came to the UK to help supervise them, and then she went back to the United States to carry on her recruitment efforts. And it was while there that she discovered of the establishment of the Women's Auxiliary Ferrying Squadron. And the then Commanding General of the US Army Air Corps, the Army Air Forces as they became, Henry Hap Arnold, was convinced by her argument that a further way of bringing women pilots into that ferrying squadron was required. So it was that Cochrane set up the Women's Flying Training Detachment at Howard Hughes Airport in Houston, Texas in November 1942. It had a class of 25 women, all of whom were required to have had 200 hours total flying time and already to be in possession of a commercial license. As I said, they obviously ferried aeroplanes around. They also undertook a degree of post-maintenance flight testing and delivering aircraft back from operational or training units to repair depots